Hi everyone, 2J's here. What's up? It's been a while since I made a video, but I was just watching some YouTube videos and I came across another teaching about the book of Job. And I mean, if you've seen some of my other videos, I've made it very clear that I don't agree with the book of Job. I don't see that it fits into the gospel or makes any sense according to the gospel and Jesus Christ's teachings. So I have a hard time accepting the book of Job as a legitimate, valid account. So the book of Job doesn't make any sense. So because if Satan needs permission, as it claims, from God, then that implies that he doesn't have free will to rebel, as the Bible claims. He, the wicked, and the angel devils, Adam and Eve, did. So, which means he would have been permitted to tempt Eve into eating the fruit. So, which means God set up the whole rebellion, the fall, sin, evil. So, what right would God have, and how just would God be in punishing in punishing his creation that he himself set up to fall and be wicked? So and there's things in the Bible about that too, where it says, oh, who could say that the potter doesn't have the right to do whatever he wants with this clay pot and this clay pot and all this? And it's like, just it seems like they're just trying to twist it because they knew that someone would come up with that philosophy and just be like, that doesn't make any sense, you know what I mean? So they're trying to counteract it with something to try to make it be like, oh, what right do you have to say blah blah blah? Well, what right does anyone have to say and claim that God permits Satan to do things when the whole gospel points out that Satan is rebelling against God, and that's what evil is rebelling against God. So evil and sin is a creation of the created going against God's will. So it's like, so that doesn't make any sense, you know? So it's like, if he permits evil instead of stopping it and opposing it, as the Bible testifies he does and will do in the end, then that would make him evil too. And that means he just creates things to judge, hurt, torture, and punish, which would make him cruel instead of loving and good, you know? So that would make him a creator of wicked, evil. And I've already touched on that because the Bible does say, oh, he creates the light and the darkness, and it says he creates the good and the evil, and he makes his blessings to shine upon both of them. But I've already touched on that in another video here on my channel. So when it talks about God creating evil, he sees us use our free will and make choices. If our choices go against his will and desire and law for us, then he can judge that and deem that as evil. And that judgment itself, him being in opposition of our actions, going like, is what makes that evil. We're going against him. So he creates that. If there was no judge, it'd be like, oh, there's no consequences, there's no good or evil because there's no judge of what's good and evil. But God's the judge. So in that way, he creates evil. But he doesn't actually force people to make decisions. And it's not like Satan couldn't do any evil without the permission from God. Like, even though when it comes down to it, yeah, God could obliterate anyone that he wishes out of existence. So yeah, in that way, things are happening and he's observing and whatever, putting a stop to whoever and allowing whoever to live and exist. But even, I mean, like that, but it just doesn't make sense because it's like, even that, it's like, oh, he's just waiting for his perfect time to stop the evil. Like, if God really hates evil, he would put a stop to it immediately. He wouldn't allow any evil, and that's what it says that he doesn't allow, and he's going to stop it. So there's something in play and in motion, but at the same time, I mean, that's the main question where people will be like, well, if God is good and he's so powerful, then why wouldn't he just stop evil and wipe all evil out of existence the second that it decides to become evil and go against him, you know what I mean? So, but yeah, that paints God out to be evil and as an abusive father instead of as a protective father, a protector, a teacher, an upholder of good, righteousness, and holiness. Like I said, evil is a creation of the created and is the result of beings going against God and God's will. So it is what God deems and judges as against his will, against himself, as against himself, you know. So if anything's against him, he deems that as evil. So the very act of them and us choosing to go against him and be against him is what makes it and us evil. If Satan does God's will with his permissions, that would make him righteous. That would make Satan righteous instead of evil. So, like, that doesn't make any sense. We know Satan is evil, which means he is against God and goes against his will and desires for his creation. So that doesn't testify that he has permission from God to do these things. It points out how he's rebelling against God, even though he knows that what's right and wrong he's supposed to, because he was a holy angel. So he knows God's will already. God makes it very clear that love is his will and to not hurt his creation. So if Satan does God's will with his permissions, that would make Satan righteous instead of evil. So we know Satan's evil, which means he is against God and goes against his will and desire for his creation. He does not do things according to God's permission. To claim God is giving Satan permission is absolute nonsense and completely contrary to the entire gospel. So if Satan and evil needs God's permission, as you are claiming and as the Bible's claiming, then that would mean God approves of evil, and that evil could not occur unless God allows it. So what right would God have to judge it and them as against him, against his will, and as evil if it's his own creation and by his approval? You know what I mean? That doesn't make any sense. So that is the same as claiming that we don't currently have the free will to break God's laws and do evil and things that are opposed of by God. We can witness that we can and do. So that's nonsense. Like, the scriptures prove that all evil is action in opposition and against God's will and desires without permission from God. So God doesn't give permission to do or be evil. So the only way the book of Job makes any sense is if it was before the fall, which it is not, because Adam and Eve were the first humans. So Job didn't exist. So the book of Job implies that Satan and evil needs God's permission and paints them out to still be servants under God's control instead of as rebels and as the rebellion that they are, who have no respect for God, God's word, and who curse God and his name all day and night. They just curse him all the time. It's like the book of Job makes no sense and doesn't fit in with the rest of the scriptures at all. So Satan is casted out. Evil is not permitted in the presence of his holiness, of God's holiness. So it's like, that's why they got casted out. No sin can, any evil can be around God. So, you know, because it says bad character can corrupt good company, and that talks about how evil can corrupt those around it and stuff like that. The Bible warns to not be yoked up with evil, to not be around evil, do not join in with them. It talks about it. It talks about just not being in the company of evil, to walk away, turn away from evil, and rebuke them, sharply rebuke them. So the book of Job tries to claim that the beast and beasts are serving God according to his will instead of as them rebelling and going against God and God's will. It seems like some added made-up nonsense that was added to confuse, and it doesn't fit in with the rest of the gospel at all. Like, it's contrary to Jesus' teachings. Jesus said he was a liar from the beginning, and he obviously wasn't a liar from the beginning of Lucifer, like of his own beginning, because it said he was once a holy angel. But what Jesus was saying, he was a liar from the beginning. He's talking about he was a liar from man and woman's beginning. From the beginning of humans, he started lying. You know, he was a liar from the very beginning of our existence. So God's character, it doesn't fit. It doesn't fit with the rest of the gospel or God's character or even Satan's character at all. So like Satan doesn't humble himself under God or take order, like listen to God anymore. Is basically what the gospel points out. He's doing things contrary and opposed to God. And he's warring with God to try to make himself the Most High. So Satan and evil clearly go against God and are against God. He and they clearly don't do as told by God. So the book of Job doesn't make any sense, and that doesn't fit the gospel at all. And I personally question it and its writer's authenticity. Who would have witnessed this happening in heaven and on earth and been able to write about this story? Like Job? No. So I don't think so. So did God directly write the book of Job or an angel? Like, I don't think so. So who? Who would have and could have written and witnessed it? You know what I mean? Like, all the other ones, like a lot of the other writings and accounts in the Bible of things happening in heaven were visions given to other prophets and stuff like that. Like, like John was given the vision and Revelation, and Isaiah given, all these different visions and stuff. It's like people were given visions of heaven and stuff like that. But this doesn't even talk about who's witnessing this happening in heaven. Like, oh, he was granted an audience, and the angels came before God's throne, and Satan came with them. Like, who's witnessing that? Who wrote this? You know what I mean? Like, so I don't know. I doubt it. I question it. It doesn't fit with the gospel. It's contrary to Christ's teachings that Satan is still doing the will of God and needs God's permissions for things and stuff like that. Like, that doesn't make any sense. Like, that doesn't make any sense. Like, they're literally rebelling. So there's some sort of war going on. There's an opposition, and opposition doesn't mean that they're under the control. So I just wanted to point that out because it doesn't make sense. So I have a hard time. I think maybe, like I said in my previous videos, maybe it's just a story that was added to try to like encourage long suffering, like Job, and to not, whether you got a good hand or a bad hand dealt to you on that day or whenever, to just still try to be positive and not curse God and be thankful to God and appreciative. And but then they're like, when it talks about like, oh, Job was blessed with twice the amount of this and that, it's like, you can't, it's so demeaning to humans, like, that you can just replace a wife and kids or pets or anything, like animals or whatever. It's just like, I don't know, the book of Job is just something that, like, literally, it just doesn't make sense. It irritates me how it doesn't make sense. Like, if people try to make it, they try to twist like the whole Bible, it like, oh, it all makes perfect sense and this and that. It's like, no, it doesn't. And the gospel isn't that I have to believe every single word of this Bible that's been interpreted by so many different people down the ages. The gospel is that I'm supposed to believe in Jesus Christ, God's Son, that He died for my sins, and that He can present me blameless in front of the Father. So that's the gospel. My gospel is to have faith in God and His Son and their character and their teaching, not that I have to believe every single word that's written by lesser prophets and by who knows who wrote half of these things, So it's like, I don't put my faith in that. I put my faith in the character of believing in Jesus' character, which is God's character ultimately, because it's the exact representation of the Father. He showed love through His Son. He showed forgiveness through His Son. He showed mercy through His Son. And He showed that He's willing to suffer with us and for us, and in order to love us and show us the way and be the way. So, like, that's where my faith is. So it's not like reliant that I totally agree with the book of Job. Like, salvation's not in believing in the exact words of the book of Job, and it's not like in believing the exact words of this lesser prophet and John and Paul and all these other guys. My faith's not in them. My faith is in Jesus Christ, God's Son, and that's where my salvation lies. So it doesn't lie. It isn't like, oh, but you have to believe in the whole thing or else none of it's credible. It's like, the prophets pointed out that they didn't fully know God and Jesus. They didn't know who the man would be that God would send and stuff like that. So it's like, the whole gospel is to point out the difference between people and God's Son Jesus, who is the Christ. If people knew God like Jesus knew God, they would be His Son too and be the Christ, but they're not. So that shows that they don't have, they don't. It says the Father's revealed through the Son, not through. Yeah, like God can talk certain messages through His prophets and stuff like that, but they don't know what they're talking about all the time. That's what the whole scriptures point out, and that's why they're not Christ. So that's why Christ is needed, because He comes, He gives the invite back to heaven, basically like okay, Dad, we'll let you back into heaven if you behave like this, like me. You know what I mean? Like, be loving, follow me, believe in me, mimic my ways, my Christ-like ways, do your best to, you know what I mean? And then to live in love, follow the laws, blah 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 blah, believe in the sacrifice that's given, and that's, you know, it's not reliant on understanding and grasping and believing every single word that's in all the books of the Bible. Like, so I don't know, I just wanted to point that out, because like when it comes to the book of Job, I don't see it being a literal story. I see it being having symbolism in there, but I don't see, like, it doesn't make mention of like I don't recall seeing any lineage of Job, of any like any history of like the family history, like genealogy, and it doesn't make any sense according to the timeline with Satan being able to be permitted in heaven amongst the angels and God. Meanwhile, he was casted out. God's not supposed to be around like evil, you know what I mean? Except for when he's basically judging it, it sounds like. But I mean, it says he left all the judgment to the Son, but I mean, apparently they're all casted out. Why would he let him back in? He's just gonna let him come back into heaven. What was it? Like I said, was he in chains? Were the other angels like guarding, or like, you know, like, what's the situation here? Because that doesn't make any sense. That he's just, oh, I was just walking to and fro along the earth, and you know, like, well, let's just prove to you. Like, God has to prove anything to Satan. Like really, like, I don't know. So this doesn't make sense to me. So I just wanted to point that out. Much love. Live to love to live. Yeah. Peace.